Yeah, but pretty sure here we are live. We are broadcasting here to the masses. So I just wanted to say hello, welcome to the Tired Boys podcast. Welcome to another show. Aaron, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm excited to get into the topics today. We had a spicy Mexico City Grand Prix this weekend, so definitely plenty to talk about there. But yeah, I'm excited to get into everything today.
Yeah, I think if you're a fan of I think if you're a fan of justice, righteousness, the good side winning,
Free my man's.
the smoting of all evil, I think this was kind of the Mexican Grand Prix for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely get into the thick of it soon, but I wanted to hit you with a one quick hitter that I saw over the past week that I found kind of interesting. But it was announced that the Nissan and Jaguar Formula E teams were both found to have overspent the 2022-2023 cost cap that was implemented in Formula E. And so I was kind of intrigued comparing it between the penalties and everything that Red Bull got for their cost cap breach compared to how it's going over in Formula E. They're both governed by the FIA, so I thought that might be interesting to kind of compare. But looking at it, Nissan was 1.96 million, or sorry, 1.96% over their 13,668,000 euro cost cap, and they were fined 300 euros. And then Jaguar was 0.6% over. They were fined 100,000 euros. And they also will miss out on the first 3 hours of testing for the upcoming Formula E season. So I find that like kind of in punishment itself relatively similar. Like Red Bull got a monetary fine, and then they got some testing restrictions in terms of wind tunnel time and whatnot that they lost. And so, in comparison to Red Bull, they went over by 1.7% of the $135 million cost cap. So, their cost cap is about 10 times the Formula E cost cap. But they were fined $7 million for that 1.7%, which is between the two other teams, which is significantly more in terms of like percentage penalty and everything. So a harsher penalty, or at least a higher monetary percentage than what we're seeing over in Formula E for these for the penalties that they received. And not that it was like really makes a difference either way, but compared to how the FIA handled these overages in Formula E and the cost cap, and how they handled it with Red Bull, I just think that it, in my mind, seeing that the kind of amount of penalty to the Nissan and Jaguar teams were lesser, in my opinion, than the Red Bull. And I think you can say that relatively confidently. I feel like just looking back at that, the FIA did a pretty consistent job across this with their penalties, and I feel like the Red Bull penalty was reasonable. I felt that way at the time as well, but I think that putting it into this perspective of the cost cap breach from Red Bull compared to how it's being handled by the FIA in these other this other racing series, that it just kind of gives a different perspective.
A different perspective, yes, but a couple of things come to mind, like the Formula One championship, the team, like you would have to look at like possible monies to be won in Formula E versus Formula One. So like if there's, let's say the like first place prize purse for Formula E and F1 was the same. I imagine they would have to weigh
Okay.
more heavily on like fines and this and that. Also, I'd be curious about like sponsorship monies and overall cost cap. Like, are the cost caps for the teams the same? Is there like 20 million or like 20 million more euro allowed for Formula One teams versus a Formula E team? Because then that the difference in fines is also taking into account like the size of the outfits and just like the size of
Well,
the format itself, you know?
yeah, and I think that's kind of addressed in terms of like so like it's basically 13.5 million cost cap for Formula E, and so their
Okay.
fines were in the hundreds of thousands. Where
Right.
for Red Bull, they're looking at 135 million like cost cap, so basically 10 times. So
Right.
you would imagine if they're in between those that the penalty would be about 10 times somewhere in between, but it's more like 25 times that instead.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why like, and I think I didn't think about that in terms of the potential winnings and everything, or the difference when it comes to winning the championship and whatnot. So that would be an interesting thing to look at. But maybe that's why there is that slight disparity between the penalty that Red Bull seemingly being harsher than what the Formula E teams, even if you like scale it up in comparison. That's a good point. I just like thought that was an interesting story, and was kind of wanted to put it out there, see if you had any thoughts and everything, because it's now that we're seeing these breaches in other instances, we're able to get a just more well-rounded view of how the FIA is like addressing them, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think it's I think it's a really solid thing to look at because also cases like this will set precedents like for the future where teams can see like okay if we do go over the cost cap, you can reason the fine will be within this amount. It also is indicative of a growing Formula E, it sounds like, where these teams are able to maybe like put more resources. The last I checked into Formula E, I know they were struggling with like some of the events, some of the cars like not doing so hot, which like kind of brings the like competitive integrity kind of into question. So I think it being in the news and talking about teams kind of overspending and looking to push their projects, I think it's actually kind of encouraging in the sense of like, yeah, like if these teams want to win this series, like that means it's kind of worth something. So in that regard, kind of exciting. Teams are willing to break the rules to get some dubs. Like I kind of like it.
Yeah, well, and what you're saying too with the like the competitive nature of Formula E, the cost cap like being introduced there as well. I don't know how long ago that was brought in or if it's always been a thing, but I think that like the intention is to kind of maintain a relative like playing field similar to the concept of Formula One with
Hmm.
a team like Haas that did not have uh, a big piggy bank where Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, some of these other teams had a lot more that they could just dump money into the car to make it faster. You'd think that the weight of all those dollar bills and coins would slow it down, but no, sir, that is not the case. But yeah, I think that it is definitely good for Formula E and an interesting thing to see whether there's some maybe calculated nature to the overages or just simple math mistakes or budget, like just they're like, well, we need to put a car out there, so we got to spend money on these parts. So yeah, definitely an interesting thing to see, and I'm curious as the future goes on. Hopefully, we don't see too many of those in the future, because again, it's something we'll get into later. But the stewards and the governing body having to get involved in the the series just kind of makes it a little less exciting in terms of what you would hope to see, I guess, in the racing aspects of things. But before we get into all that, the other quick hitter I had was just I follow Kimi Räikkönen on Twitter, and his son has started karting over the past couple of years, and so I've seen him post a lot about his son winning and this and that. But in his first international karting championship, so he was winning, I guess, in all these regional championships, he went from P22 up to P5 for his finish. So a huge surge through the field. And he seems to really enjoy it. Kimi seems to be loving being the dad coach on the sidelines and everything for his son. But just a pretty cool, heartwarming kind of story from the Iceman.
Yeah, sure. It's just like starting New Game Plus. Like, you beat the game one time, and then you just, like, restart and take all of, like, the leveled equipment, all the knowledge, and all your weapons. You can just take it into a new game and just give it to your kid and just help them win. It's literally like New Game Plus.
And seems a little more wholesome than the Jos Verstappen, Max Verstappen growing up story. So I feel like this is it's nice to see, and who knows, maybe we'll see Robin Raikkonen in Formula One down the road here.
Would be wild. But yeah, I remember talking about, when he was retiring on the pod, we were saying, like, oh, what's he going to do? Is there, like, another driving series? We actually didn't know that yes, he would still be in racing, but as a coach, not a driver.
Yeah, just dad coach going around and helping out his son. So pretty cool. But getting over into some of our other normal segments, do you work here? I want to hear your input. So there's some rumors going around. Franco Colapinto has been on Red Bull's radar now, that if Sergio Perez does not continue on with Red Bull and Liam Lawson is given that seat, there's the opening in the sister team in the RBV Carb, and Franco Colapinto is on the list of options. It's a lot of moves to make this Tetris happen, but what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on Checo? Just give us all the don't go too hard on Checo, but I want to hear your thoughts on it.
I think the best move, obviously, is the return of Daniel Ricciardo. This is just, this is all just him getting back into a seat. I'm just kidding. All right, so I think it's interesting that Colapinto is able to have the kinds of performances that are drawing a lot of team, like, roster management, that he's able to draw a lot of eyes. I think it's interesting that Red Bull, as one of the teams that sounds like would have the most amount of money to throw at Colapinto, if they are, like, really gunning for him. It shows that Sergio Perez stocks are just, you should have got out months ago with the way these prices have plummeted. So yeah, Sergio Perez coin just really, really not doing so hot. And it's like, man, there's something about, dude, it's crazy. The confidence of the team, the confidence of the, like, the public opinion, right? And it is matched by a Q1 exit for this guy. I remember hearing on the broadcast, I don't know if it was like one of the analysts or one of the commentators, but they said, and I quote, "It is hard to win a championship when you're in a one-car team," like in reference to Max Verstappen and the Ferraris closing and the McLarens are gone, honestly, in the constructors. So I would not envy Red Bull's position in this regard, so I'm not surprised that they are considering every option available. I think the thing that's really hurt would be a Kick Sauber misses out on a Colapinto. They've been struggling for a long time. Here's this like young guy comes in, phenomenal drive. He's not married to any seat, right? He's just coming in as a ringer and like putting in work. You know, we see Liam Lawson coin lose a little bit of stock this weekend too. You know, he's getting into some sister team squabbles. We hate to see that. You know, two effectively effectively teammates. You know, getting in the way of each other. So I think like the angle that I would look at is Red Bull would be like taking another team's chance at like a young competitive driver. And I'm not saying right or wrong. It's just like an angle that I'm thinking of it. But like I said, I'm not surprised. They need any possible chance at filling that seat with a driver with two hands, two eyes, and two legs that can just like step on the pedal. It is wild.
Yeah,
Thought.
and no, I'm with you. I think that it wouldn't be a I don't think it would be a bad move from Red Bull. I think it is sort of recycling though back into some pre-championship Red Bull format and everything. We're seeing other teams climb up, be competitive, be fighting at the top, and we're seeing Red Bull, especially at least in the constructors fight, falling away, and a large part in that due to Checo. So like making that decision isn't a bad one, but are we going back to now a Max Verstappen young Pierre Gasly, or then a Max Verstappen young Alex Albon? Are we going to see that second seat just be rotating again, where Liam Lawson gets put in and after half a season at the summer break he's slacking, so then boom, down to V carb, and let's roll in Yuki Tsunoda, let's roll in Colapinto. But the other side of it too is I just wonder how much of this these struggles that Sergio Perez is having is due to age and just being like kind of past his peak maybe of driving a little bit, but
Past
also but I mean like that obviously comes into play to some extent. Like your reflexes, your instincts, and things like that do, as you get older, slow down a little bit. But at the same time, what part of that is just you're getting beat down by your teammate week after week after week, and you're just kind of like off to the side. You're getting abuse from the media, you're getting abuse from fans, all of these things. It seems so interesting that a guy like Colapinto can come in versus Alex Albon, where there's zero expectation of that second seat in Williams other than please don't crash our car after Logan Sargent exits. And Colapinto comes in, and it's hard to tell with these young guys. Is it just that they are confident and willing to be a little more aggressive in everything to go out, where some of these longer standing drivers are maybe a little more cautious, tentative? We're seeing Lawson duke it out with Checo, with Alonso, putting himself in the points the first race he's back in the car. Like, it's this like, I don't know. It seems almost like it's some of this just fresh like energy and all, and coming in with a excited like mind forward mindset, as opposed to some of these drivers who have maybe just been getting kind of worn down, like maybe an Alex Albon, you could say too, who has struggled immensely in the past couple of weeks now that he's had a teammate who is really pushing him and on his heels, that pressure. Or maybe it's just a little slump of form, a little bump in the road, but it seems like some of these new guys coming in are giving that fresh energy. I just don't know for how long that's going to keep going, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Dude, what about this angle, though? So, I feel like there's a strong possibility where we're seeing the beginnings of kind of, because there's no rules against like the sister team thing. And over the last months, with all of these driver conversations, the linking of VCarb and the main Red Bull team has become stronger and stronger. The more the idea of like Sergio out, who's going in, they're becoming closer and closer in the narrative. I'm curious if we're not going to begin to see a scenario where more teams are going to think about buying a second slot so they can test these drivers. You're talking about this like rotating roster of like young talent to put next to Max Verstappen. Bro, that might actually be the problem that many teams are going to look to have. Isn't that a boon to have two extra seats effectively where you can just test? There's like right now there is like no rules against what you can do.
I have
What are your thoughts?
well, I think at this point, yes, I think that that's a good concept and all for
Just think
any
about
team.
it. We're in a four team meta right now. Five if you're being generous. It's
We
a four
are.
team meta.
But does that really? I think if that happened, it would be damaging to the quality of Formula One to some extent, where the competition level and everything would not be what the intention is. And at that point, I think the FIA would I think the intention is you want to have 10 teams that are yeah, we're in a period of time where right now it's almost the end of the season and there are 6 teams that are just like going nowhere basically. But that's not every season, or those teams are shifting around. We've seen McLaren go from back of the grid almost to leading the Constructors' Championship in like 3 years ago. They were doing terrible. Like they were dragging that car around some of the circuits. Mm-hmm. And so I think that if you kind of remove the ability for that that meritocracy of just performing, if you perform well, you're gonna get better guys to sign with you, you're gonna get better engineers on your squad, you're gonna keep improving. Like, I think if that happened where there's 5 teams that have a sister team and there's just 5 like junior teams in Formula One, then there would be, I feel like the FIA would put the kibosh on it and be like, nah, we're not doing this because now we're just saying there's only going to be 5 good teams. There's no chance, because all that would happen is when those drivers on the sister teams start driving well, they're just going to jump them up to the main roster, and that sister team is going to perpetually just maintain that second tier status. And I think already we have the drivers programs where you have Red Bull Juniors in Formula 2 and Williams Juniors and all these things. So I don't think it's necessarily a necessary thing for teams in Formula 1, and also to like for the cost of it to buy that second slot. I feel like Red Bull kind of bought that second slot early enough on. It's like buying Microsoft stock back in 1990.
Fair. I guess I'm just surprised to hear that angle where it's like, but if a good chunk of the talent coming up is really strong and able to get solid drives, well, the sister teams wouldn't be like B tier. It would just be like,
You have two chances to win.
yeah. Like
Okay.
that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like if all of the drivers in that like third and fourth seat, we'll say, was a Colapinto or a Behrman or like somebody that is like really like proving their mettle and competitive, like a Liam Lawson, well then it wouldn't be boring. It would just be like a different take on kind of what was already happening. And I'm whatever. This is like
Yeah.
in fantasy Disneyland. I'm just it's so wild to think about. There's so many drivers that are clearly capable of racing at this level. The seats are just so few, and it seems like Red Bull is a little bit like going all the way back to Colapinto. It feels like Red Bull is just spoiled for choice. They can take whoever, and it feels like they have these like weird two extra seats that nobody else does, where they can almost like house a Colapinto there, see how Liam Lawson does, and then like it's like a
Yeah.
really wildly positive position to be in.
It it is, but
I
like
see what you're
there
saying about like competitive integrity and like does it make the series less interesting? It's like, well,
there's
there's a lot of aspects that already make it uninteresting.
That's true, and I think it also is just the like I think it's a blessing and a curse to some extent with Red Bull.
Yes,
Like
of
it
course.
it it definitely draws a lot of ire from fans and a lot of just additional like just eyeballs on you of pressure on your drivers. I mean, Yuki probably feels a ridiculous amount of pressure of just proving himself to be able to potentially drive it. Like he's got to be like sitting there stewing and in his head I'd be in my head if they're like, oh yeah, this guy who's drove in like 6 Formula 1 races is like the leg up on you to go ahead and race in the Red Bull main team if Checo goes away. Like that would feel bad. And so then the pressure of being in that position, I feel like if you're, say, a George Russell on Williams, where you're just racing the best you can, trying to get experience and everything, and hoping to get in a better team. Yeah, you have that Williams Mercedes link a little bit, and that link with Toto and all ahead of time, but I feel like there was a lot less pressure in that sense on him than there would be to some new driver or young driver in like RB, because there's this expectation of like move up or get out kind of. Where with other teams like Williams would have been content just hanging on to George Russell as long as he was willing to drive there. So there's definitely some different aspects of it, but I think it definitely makes for interesting conversation because there's so many possibilities, and Red Bull has that flexibility, but there's also that just added pressure of making the right decision in that.
Yeah, I was having a conversation. Another interesting idea, just like to expand on the like roster moves conversation, is like, what if the rules change to a 3 or a 4 man roster with just like two active drivers? The idea being you have like you could tech into like specific skill sets, and the example given was like a Moneyball scenario where, if you're approaching the if you're approaching the street circuits, you'd field this lineup of drivers because they're like more fit for those environments and this and that. And I thought that was a really fascinating idea, as a way for teams to like really kind of, we were throwing the idea around of like min-maxing, right? Really like getting the most out of every weekend. And I guess that's where my mind was with this sister team thing, is like it would just be a place where they could cut the teeth of these young drivers without like without feeling like they were taking this like risk in like the main team, like a 1-year contract kind of deal. And obviously these are just like just ideas, right? But when you think of a Colapinto and just these drivers who have so much promise, I'm thinking of like an Isaac Hadjar in Formula 2. His drive this year has been phenomenal. Like, is there going to be a place for that guy, or is he going to have to just like take his second best option or third best option because like, oh, it's just like not the right time or whatever. So it's these types of like things that are in the back of my mind when I'm presenting ideas like this, because I would find it fascinating any move that they could make where you're able to just get like 1 or 2 more drivers on and just see their talent and their skill expression.
Yeah, and I definitely think that would be an interesting opportunity. I think the hang up, I guess, with Formula One is to some extent that like some of the current regulations, because you only get so much time in the car. Like you can't, you only have a certain amount of sim time, you have a certain amount of like on track time outside of race weekends and things like that. And so with the continued development of the car, like we see how these top level drivers can struggle from one week to the next just because of upgrades and updates to the car, making the feel different and changing it. Like I'm imagining a stretch of like 2-3 street circuits in a row where upgrades are being brought to the car, and you've got Checo, the street circuit mastermind, in there for 3 races, and then Liam Lawson comes back to an entirely different car a month and a half later with minimal amount of time in that car to like fine tune it and get a feel for it and everything. I think for maybe more of a like stock series that might be more feasible, just because the cars aren't changing as much. But I think that would be another side of that might make that difficult to min-max, because there's that added risk of whoever's coming in just not being like up to speed, or like in thinking to like League of Legends, where they sometimes will have different rosters and different lineups based on certain champions or whatnot. It almost feels like a team that's down 2-0 in a best of 5 who just chucks in that other top laner because they're like,
see what he can do.
Might as well change something. We've done nothing for the first 2 games. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's a little bit tougher in Formula One specifically, but yeah, definitely some interesting conversations and thoughts. I like bouncing these around.
But yeah, Colapinto obviously going to be on Red Bull's radar. They're looking for talent. He's it, like literally right now.
He doesn't have a seat. He's
right.
Yeah.
That's as free agent as you get. Pretty sure in the points this weekend as well, wasn't it?
Just outside. So
okay, so he's P12. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
So, but not a bad weekend, which we'll go ahead and get into. But before we do that, we just wanted to remind everyone, if you're listening, following along, watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, go over to our Spotify. If you're listening to us on Google Podcasts, on YouTube, whatever, subscribe. Check out our Twitter. We're looking to get 100 subscribers before the end of the year, but we appreciate everyone who's here listening with us now, just tell your friends and have them join on with the Tyred Boys.
New episodes after every single race weekend. So if you're looking to get a Formula One drive, or at least a Formula One knowledge drive, come and join us, because we've got roster seats available for as many people who want them. We've got seats to fill, so come and join us. But for now, back to the episode.
Alrighty, so getting into the Mexico City Grand Prix weekend, we'll start off with the usual winners and losers segment for the episode. So, Justin, why don't you lead us in with your first winner of the week?
So I'll go with a little bit of a zoomed out view. So my first winner for the weekend is Ferrari. I think they had a really strong performance overall. You could see the pace in each of the practice sessions, pretty much topping the boards in each one of them, at least for Carlos Sainz. So you could see that the pace was there all weekend. A really, really solid qualifying from Carlos as well. Puts himself on pole position. First time in 2024, believe it was, and his 6-1 total. So really starting to rack him up. The interesting thing there for Ferrari, back-to-back double podiums, like truly something special. So we see the double podium in the United States, and then here this weekend. So we had Charles Leclerc podium last time, Carlos Sainz on the podium this time, top step of the podium, I should say. So really just like lights out for Ferrari, kind of a knockout punch, if last weekend was the left hook, knockout punch this weekend. So crazy to see them doing it twice back to back, and in such dominant fashion. Like I said, they had the pace all weekend. So my first winner here for the weekend is Ferrari, clearly just like maxing out the points. Amazing.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. That was my first winner of the week as well.
Oh, hell yeah.
Just kind of continue on with that. Ferrari, now both drivers have multiple wins on the season. We have 6 different drivers with multiple wins across the season this year, which is just unheard of. But Carlos Sainz, and then like you said with Charles Leclerc last week with the win in the U.S., huge race from him. He puts it on the podium, goes on to secure the win. A great drive through and through the entire weekend. So huge props. And Leclerc, he had a good shot at P2, but Lando was just coming in a little too hot from the field behind him. So a lot of points, picking up a lot in the Constructors and Drivers' Championships. Leapfrogging over Red Bull now, up 25 points, a whole race win over Red Bull in the Constructors standings. If Max holds on to this, I said it last week, but there's never been a team that finishes P3 in the Constructors and also has the Drivers' Champion. So with that big leap from Ferrari, it's they're really putting the gap between them and Red Bull, and kind of chasing after McLaren, picking up a lot of points in the past couple of weeks on them as well. So yeah, big winner from Ferrari. And how about your second winner for this week?
My second winner, actually, I just want to zoom in on Ferrari just a little bit more and talk about Carlos Sainz specifically. This weekend, to me, felt very special from Carlos, as we've seen a bunch of drivers that are like in kind of his, I'll say, like graduating class, or like in and around those same years. We've seen some of them have issues converting the pole position into a victory, and it is impressive to see it go for him. I don't want to say unchallenged, but it looked relatively easy, where we've seen a Lando Norris starting on pole position have really tough starts and just lose it right there. We've seen Charles Leclerc have pole position multiple times in this era at a track like Monaco and only be able to convert this year, right? He won Monaco,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
we see often for some of the drivers who are looking for some of their like maiden victories or their maybe second or third one. Sometimes that pole position conversion into a victory is really really hard to do and not always a given. So I think it's really strong, especially on a track that has not been won by pole in like recent years. I think it's very impressive for Carlos to even lose that number one spot and have to get the overtake done on track on Max Verstappen, the one that passed him. I think it's very impressive to notice when his opponent was like on the back foot, he sees him harvesting energy, goes for it, gets the overtake done, never seen again. So Carlos was aggressive. I think he was intelligent. His overtake was very skillful. And in an era, in a year, when people are having difficulty converting that pole position, nailed it.
Yeah, and he hasn't had of his 4 race wins really any that are super straightforward. And so for this to be relatively smooth outside of that, losing P1 at the start, which typically happens in Mexico, and then being able to, like you said, make that move. Definitely a big shout out to Carlos this weekend. Huge win for him. And I'm happy for him to be performing so well here at the end of the year before he slides over to Williams. So his last opportunities in Ferrari, at least for the meantime. So yeah, big congrats to him. My second winner this week, though, was the Haas boys, and particularly Kevin Magnussen. Similarly, kind of sliding out of the team, but for him, it'll be to the retirement home after the season, probably, with not having a seat for next year. But he had a phenomenal weekend. P7 for K-Mag in the qualifying, P10 for Hulkenberg in the qualifying. Hulkenberg bumps up to P9. Kevin Magnussen was able to hold back Oscar Piastri for a long time and had just phenomenal tire management throughout the race. To be able to kind of even stay ahead of an out-of-place McLaren for as long as he did, and to finish that way was just massive for him, massive for the team as well. 8 points is huge when it comes to the Constructors' Championship. They now have put a significant gap up 10 points on the RB squad. Not going to catch Aston Martin most likely without something particularly crazy happening, but they are now kind of solidly at the head of that back five, that back half of the grid. And just a phenomenal weekend from both drivers there in the Haas.
Yeah, I big time agree with that. Honestly, Haas has really impressed here in the last couple of weeks, and this one is no different here at Mexico City. The double points finish, I think, is like really, really big. Looking forward, obviously, not going to be able to do much more this season. Obviously, every point counts, but I think these performances, the recent head of staff changes, leave me very excited for Haas moving into 2025. And yeah, I would agree. Definitely worthy of the coveted Tie Boys Pod winners.
No, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, they had a great weekend, but slide down to the losers for this week. I'll lead you in with my first loser. So my first loser was Sergio Checo Perez, having just a brutal qualifying initially out in Q1 at his home race. There's all the excitement and hype around seeing him out there, and he just immediately gets knocked out of the qualifying. And then just a really tough race. He's battling with Liam Lawson. battling. I forget the other driver he was battling with a little bit. I think it might have been Stroll. I could be wrong, but either way, picks up some damage on the car and is just struggling to get the car around throughout when he goes in for his second pit stop, which most drivers were going for the one stopper. The broadcast thought he might have been retiring because it was just that bad. And so Checo just a really rough weekend, finishing the last of the finishers after having to do a third pit stop right at the end. And just unfortunate, especially at his home race, to have that performance.
Yeah, and Sergio is actually my top loser here for the weekend as well. The only thing I'll add was the caveat of I kind of included Fernando Alonso in there, thinking of it like the hometown kind of or like legacy stories where Alonso was celebrating his 400th Grand Prix start. And again, just like really tough in that regard. Isn't able to do anything on the weekend. So yeah, these... you come in wanting these drivers to have just like a lights out performance, and it is the complete opposite. So yeah, for the fans and for them, it does like fall a little bit flat in that regard. Sergio says that Mexico is like the only race he wants to perform in, and man, did he ever. So yeah, definitely worthy of the losers in this regard. And honestly, my second one for the weekend is the second Red Bull driver, so just Red Bull catching all the flack. Max driving aggressively, not able to hold off Lando, and then even on top of the like penalties and all the kerfuffle in there, like just the lack of pace. Like he wasn't able to fight he wasn't able to fight Carlos at all. So I think Max really losing out this weekend, really kind of getting the short stick.
Yeah, and that leads well into my second loser. I initially had Max, but I think overall it's just the and yeah, he had a tough weekend. The car, like tire deg and everything that he was having, he was just struggling with the car, which I think we anticipated a little bit, but not quite to that extent. But I mean, we've mentioned it multiple weeks now, 2 weeks in a row, multiple races throughout the season. The stewards having to get involved to make these decisions, and someone's going to be mad on either side of who and why they're penalized and how much and everything. It just takes away from the excitement of the fight, and that in part is... at least in this week, due to Max's decisions and his poor decisions in my mind of the way he drove. It's I mean, I'm a fan. I like rooting for him, but at the same time, that was just not in line with what you want to see racing. I think the initial move where he kind of pushed Lando a little bit wide was not that outrageous. I think
everybody does that.
Maybe that could have been a 5-second penalty instead of the 10. I didn't think that was too excessive for a 10-second penalty after seeing other penalties over the past couple weeks be the 5 seconds. But the second move was just completely uncalled for. That was Max with a full head of steam, not anywhere close to making the corner, pushing Lando way off, and really just some dangerous driving there. He shouldn't be doing that, and he does just have a hot head sometimes when things aren't going his way, and I feel like he's grown somewhat in that, but every now and then we have these moments where he just kind of reverts back to some of his old just hot-headedness and everything. And it's just not fun to watch like the entire rest of the race. I was just like, why did you have to do that? Like, I'm not going to enjoy any of the rest of the race now because you're just fighting from P17 to get back up into the points. And he put together a decent recovery from that point, but he shouldn't have even been in that position. If he hadn't done that, yeah, maybe he loses out to Lando. Maybe Lando with his pace goes on and wins the race. But he ends up ahead of both Mercedes, most definitely, instead of being behind both of them. He would have picked up a significantly higher amount of points. So he would probably have finished P4, pick up 12 points. Lando picks up 3 extra points on him by getting the win. If that ends up being the scenario with Lando P1, Max P4. But yeah, it's just, I wanted to, like, the fight between them, it's frustrating seeing Carlos go by Max, and Max fights him, like, tough, fair, like, but doesn't do anything too crazy. And then as soon as it's Lando, his title contender, he just gets hot-headed in these instances as of late. And yeah, it's just not what you want to see. And to now, in back-to-back weeks, last week you have people, the stewards penalizing Lando. It was all Max's fault and yada, yada, yada. And this week, like Max is getting screwed over because the stewards gave him 20 seconds when anyone else would have gotten 10 seconds. Like, it's just sucks that the stewards have to interject themselves, but they do. Like, they have to keep things moving in the right direction and above board. I just wish that they wouldn't be put in that position, and we've seen it too much.
Sure, but we live in a society, Jerry. We need the rules. But yeah, we don't want to see fine margins have to, like, be decided by somebody's decision. We want the drivers to, like, figure it out themselves within track limits.
Everyone hates at the end of a NFL game when a penalty gets called on the Hail Mary pass and you feel like the team's being given the opportunity to win, or someone shooting at the buzzer in the NBA and they call a foul when it was like on the line, but it's like, yeah, they should call it, and people are like, oh, you don't blow your whistle when it's in a game deciding position. Like, no one likes the officiating to be involved in making these, like, win or lose decisions and everything. So in this circumstance, similarly, it's just you don't want to see it. I think it just takes away from the excitement for the fans and for the viewership in general. It takes the conversation away from the phenomenal drive that Carlos Sainz put out there and everything to talk about the little spits and spats on the road throughout the early section between Max and Lando. But just talking about the Grand Prix itself a little bit more, we did see some other fights on the track. We saw Checo and Liam Lawson duking it out. Liam Lawson showing the bird to Checo as he drove by, giving him some unfavorable hand signs. I think it's these pressure situations. Lawson probably feels a little bit on the hot seat to prove himself. Checo, of course, going the other way, trying to maintain his position and everything. We've seen a lot of these little squabbles throughout over the past couple weeks.
Yeah, and it's not surprising to see. And I think Lawson's point after the race was, to me, well-founded. Like, what's he supposed to do? Just give up ground just because he's been here longer? If these drivers believe that they are within the sporting regulations and within the right to keep any position that they do, I go for it. What do we want? And I believe that while the middle finger may not be sporting, as they say. Yeah, you don't want guys that are just gonna like move over because somebody else is like, just driving here too. That's not really what we're here for. So I like to see them getting their elbows out, as it were. It kind of ruins both of their races. So hopefully for Lawson, maybe like a lesson of some kind where like you have a lot to lose in a scenario like this, but yeah, you like to see drivers going head to head. It's just the margins are so thin for head to head where like, it's so easy for somebody just to end up with side pod damage and just like ruin the race and make it just like, aw.
Yeah, like breaking your car in my mind isn't really worth that P15 position.
No,
so.
never. Exactly.
So yeah, I'm with you there. I think there needs to be some logical decisions made as well, and that comes from the team also. I think the team and sometimes the team, and obviously they're on their driver's side, they're rooting for them and everything, but sometimes the teams can be a little pacifying of their driver, where they're just like, oh no, like you didn't do anything wrong, like, yeah, that guy sucks.
Well, now being like when they're in the car, now's not the time to fight it. They'll likely talk about it in like the debrief. So yes, I agree with you, but even it's like for good reason that they do that.
Oh, 100%.
You just have to move on, or else you just distract them.
But also, like, they can all be like, give them those reminders of like, hey, like, don't do something stupid that's going to damage the car. Like, it's not worth it. Depending on the circumstance, of course. But yeah, looking. Go ahead.
Last thing I'll say on this, I think if you're not ready to stand on the side of the track and huck a front wing at your opponent driver, don't do anything at all. Honestly, a middle finger is nothing if you're not willing to huck your front wing.
Yeah, you got to be ready to back it up.
Exactly.
Put your front wing where your mouth is, or where the other person's mouth is.
Yeah, where they're going to be. Exactly. But no, yeah. I think for young drivers getting their elbows out, quality. Do you have to flip people off while you're doing it? Probably not.
Nah, but who hasn't flipped someone off when they're driving? I mean, come on.
Yeah, it does feel pretty good. You just feel like your anger just goes straight up to the heavens, right out that middle finger.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I flipped someone off this morning because they almost hit me when I was driving Senna. I was like, oh, it was like the baby in the back seat. I was like, my child.
Of course.
So
you got to get a Senna on board sign.
They got the horn. They got the bird from me. It's a good thing that F1 cars don't have horns. I think we'd be hearing them quite a bit, but
that would honestly be hilarious.
But they'd have to be funny sounding horns, just like
yeah, just like wild sounds.
Yeah, no normal horns, but looking at some of the rest of the race weekend. Alpine, quick note for them, but Pierre with a great drive, puts it in P8 from qualifying, ends up getting that 1 point in P10 at the back there, which is big for them as they're still in that tight fight with Williams, just 3 points back from them in the constructors. That's that every little bit counts, and there's still enough time in the season for that to flip with just one good weekend from Alpine. So chipping away at that lead and a nice weekend from Pierre there. I was also just impressed with Valtteri. He had a pretty solid weekend overall. He just makes it into Q2, starts P15. Was up riding near the points and in the points for quite a bit of the race, up in P10, and then just slowly gets passed with Piastri and some of these other cars coming through the field. But a P14 from him, he beat out Joe again, but ahead of Liam Lawson and Checo too. I was happy to see him just up a little bit higher, even if it wasn't really that close to the points. I was just happy to see him have a nice weekend, as nice as you can in that car.
Yeah, of course, and one could easily get the feeling that like these may be some of his last races, depending on who gets a seat, who's up for consideration. So yeah, if you are a Valtteri enjoyer, get your time in now, because it may not be forever. So yeah, it is nice to see. It is nice to see him getting the most out of the car. Is kind of how it seemed, but yeah, not much else to say there.
Yeah.
Oh well, I guess other than Joe kind of improved his position, he was like qualified at the back, and he gained a little bit. I think there were some drivers, obviously, like with the DNFs and the damage, you would kind of expect him to kind of take those slots then. But improved his position, so not terrible.
Yeah, and his qualifying is just so rough. I mean, he was 4/10 off the next person ahead of him, which was Esteban Ocon in P19. Like, he's just not putting in competitive times in qualifying, and then that's just like leaving him in the dust for the race in an already rough car. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely been opportunities for him. There's been plenty of drivers who have had bad qualifying performances that if he just put in a solid one in one of those times, he could be jumping up. But yeah, just consistently at the back, but he didn't make any mistakes really, and picks up a couple of places with the other drivers squabbling a little bit and having their issues. So yeah, not a terrible weekend for him, but unfortunate that he's just not able to put in the qualifying performances and convert that into even what I would call like a solid weekend for Valtteri in that car. So yeah, definitely frustrating. But outside of that, I don't have too many other notes here.
Well, I was really disappointed for Yuki Tsunoda. That was a really tough position for him to be in early in the race. Has a fine qualifying, and then just gets just pushed a little wide. You can see he's like riding on the curb, and just a little bit of a adjustment from Albon kind of takes them both out. So unfortunately, I don't think there's like anybody at fault there. Obviously, they're just tight packed. It looked like a decent move from Yuki as well. The problem was just Gasly coming around on Albon's side. So unfortunate for Yuki. You don't like to see that, especially when there's seats up for grabs kind of thing. So not a result that he'll want to be repeating here towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and I actually remembered, I do have one other note, but just I think for Mercedes, they put in a solid weekend, but the way the race kind of ended up, I think, shows the difference between the upgraded car and the prior version. So George still driving with old parts because of the crashes and everything, not having the new upgrades. He'll have them back for the next race in Brazil. So he'll be back on even playing field with Lewis, but Lewis finishing a little slower in qualifying just behind him, but then being able to make that comeback and have the better pace over the long run of the race to pick up the position and jump ahead of George in the race at the end. I thought that was kind of like an interesting point. I think that's what you typically are looking to see when drivers, like, one has the upgrades and one doesn't on the car. That's kind of the hope, is that you can see that very close head-to-head comparison. But definitely shows that Mercedes has their upgrades, I think, have brought a little bit more to the car. And so with George on those next week in Brazil, should be back into play for him.
Yeah, and they continue to just string these like consistent results kind of in a line in a row. So yeah, happy to see that. We're, like you're saying, looking forward to the to both drivers having the upgrade package. But yeah, overall, they ended P5, P6 on the grid, so they're the like third fastest car.
P4 and 5.
Oh, 4 and 5. Okay, gotcha.
With Max dropping back behind him.
Gotcha. Damn. Okay. So yeah, just solid pace all around. They're probably not in closing distance, like points wise. Probably staying where they're at, but just getting good results either way.
I don't know. Aston Martin might make up that 280 point difference.
That'd be crazy.
You never know.
Where would that come from?
Fantasyland, because there's not that many points left unless maybe they win or they finish and get every point across the entire field for both drivers and no one else gets any points.
See, now my multi-team meta is making more sense.
There you go. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's
the easy hoon.
A pretty significant gap there, but to wrap up the Mexico City Grand Prix, we had a Carlos Sainz P1, Lando Norris P2, Charles Leclerc P3. In the driver's standings, we have Max Verstappen P1, Lando Norris P2, 42 points back, and Charles Leclerc in P3. And then we have McLaren, Ferrari, and now Red Bull, with Ferrari jumping up to P2 for the top 3 of the constructors' standings. Yeah,
can you believe scrub Charles Leclerc? Literally just like unforced error at the end of the race to give up the back-to-back 1-2. He's just like, nah.
There was a little bit of rain, man. There was just a little bit of... Track was getting a little slick. He just came flying around that corner. And actually, there one final post-race note. But this proves that there's a vendetta against Max Verstappen. It happened in the race. He shouldn't have gotten all these penalties. And he gets community service. But Leclerc can go say the F word in the post-race press conference, and everyone's like, oh, just give him a little talking to off to the side after the race, or after the press conference. Charles got scolded for dropping the F-bomb in the post-race press conference. Free my mans. Max did nothing wrong. That's all I gotta say. No, I'm kidding.
Fair. Hey, fair.
The press conference thing I still think is silly. They tried to penalize Max, but yeah, with the race incidents, as I mentioned earlier, definitely were deserved. But yeah, Charles got a nice little talking to after the post-race press conference there.
That little shit. How dare he?
I know. I can't believe him. These non-native English speakers messing up their words. Oh, horrible.
They should be held to a higher standard. But let's take our pals through the cool down lap here. Tell me what you got going on this week.
Yeah, so for this week, I'll start off with my music. I haven't really had anything specific I've been jamming to, but Spotify, I've been just using a lot of they've improved a little bit on some of the mixes that they create for you that for like vibes. I have a couple of playlists, like a chill mix, an upbeat mix, hip hop mix, but it integrates a bit more of like just the artists that you listen to, and then kind of artists that are similar and all, as opposed to some of their previous like daily mixes where it's just the same songs that you listen to again and again and again. These seem to give a little bit more variety and change a little more frequently, which I appreciate. So while I've been doing the bathroom project here at the house and driving to and from work, I've been just listening to those a bit more. So nothing too crazy there. For my visual medium this week, I've been watching a new anime. It's called Seven Seeds. It's on Netflix. But the concept is that the world realizes, however far ahead of time, that a meteor is going to hit the Earth and essentially cause another ice age type extinction level event for humans. So Japan and all these other countries in the world put into place kind of a plan to select top specimens, cryogenically freeze them, and have them wake up in the future when the world is safe to try and habitate, I don't know, and whatnot. So it's just the story of these people who are kind of waking up out of the blue. Like, a lot of them were not told about being a part of this project. So they're just waking up who knows how long down the road to a completely different place with very few humans around, very different animals who've kind of cropped up and everything. And so definitely an interesting one. It's a little bit different from my typical like fantasy action kind of shows, but it's been an intriguing watch. And I've been enjoying it. But my food this week, Colleen and I tried out a brewery in the area that we haven't been to before. We had it recommended, and so went on Sunday, and they might have the best wings that I've had in this area. We've been kind of seeking out, like, trying to figure out who has the best hot wings in the area. We had one that we were like, okay, they're the top of our board for now, but this one would be, if not beating them, at least a very close second. So we enjoyed that, hanging out after working hard on this bathroom remodel we're doing, and having a nice, just chill Sunday night dinner.
Oh yeah, that's really exciting. What makes a good buffalo wing for you? What do you like?
For me, so and some people like probably will have issue with this, but I like some good quality blue cheese with it as well. Like, I like to pair them together. But just in terms of quality buffalo wing, I like it crispy but still juicy. So like crispy outside but still juicy on the inside. And then the quality of buffalo sauce, like this place has their own house-made buffalo sauce, which was it was really solid. It had good flavor. There's plenty of sauce on the wings. It wasn't like too dry or just like completely soaked in sauce. It was a nice balance. So, but the wing itself, like the crispiness of it, I've had too many wings that are just like kind of, the outsides are just kind of softer, mushier, which some people like, but as long as it's cooked. But for me, I like that nice little crunch kind of when I'm chomping in. So that's what makes the difference for me personally.
It's crazy that when asked about what makes a good wing, the first thing you enter into is the molded cream sauce that you're going to dip the wing into. You're like, well, that's the thing that really matters.
Well, it impacts it because I like it. I like blue cheese with buffalo wings just in every situation if it's available. And that can break even a good wing with a bad like blue cheese dip. It can take away from it. So I was impressed by both sides of it, but the wing itself was really good.
I can appreciate that. So this is a man that really knows his chicken wings. That's why I come to you for the you've got the sauce clearly.
Yeah. Well, it's the problem is it would be too tough to do a taste test of these multiple places like all together. I've had this conversation with like some of my buddies about wanting to do a taste test of all of these different cheesesteak places around Philly and whatnot.
Okay.
But I feel like if you're just hopping from place to place, you're not getting the side by side comparison. But if you get them all together, then they're not hot and fresh and like at their top performance. So
Right.
it's a catch-22 of comparing foods. But yeah, that my wing ratings makes it a little tougher to just put them on a scale.
Sure. Yeah, I think we could really get into like food grading and comparing. I think the tech that's like really holding us back is cloning, because what you would really need is a bunch of you to bring back a hot steak, and you're all you sitting at the table and you say go, and you get to experience every sandwich at the same time. That would be the goal. Yeah, I mean, this cottage industry around cloning is going to be booming, sir.
What I need is all of these restaurants to care about my opinion enough that they all just come to me and make the food right here for me.
This is true. Or the scariest thing, we find out it all just comes from one ghost kitchen and there is no difference at all.
Yep, that could be it. Could be coming from Sin City Foods.
Literally 2024 problems. Alright, so my flavor of the week here. Dude, this meal is out of sight. I love it so much. It is actively competing with some of my like favorite meals across history.
Okay.
Homemade Mongolian beef. Rice, broccoli, fried up steak in a nice, it's like a, like a nice
thin cut.
Yep. Oh yeah, in a nice like little Szechuan sauce.
Okay.
Killer. We call it sugar beef. We affectionately call it sugar beef because that's what it is. That's what all those like Chinese sauces are. That's what they all are, and it's amazing.
Lots of
Mongolian
sugar,
beef.
Lots of sodium.
Oh yeah, amazing. Killer. So that's my food here for the week. Nice. My music, I've put it on multiple times this week, and I'm convinced it's like an old rec from like pod episodes like 100 years ago.
Okay.
Do you remember recommending an album called Blissful Awareness by a dude named Khan? Kaan. And I believe the title track that you would have introduced me to, I'm pretty sure it was called The Reaper, where he like talks about like negative influences like in your world, and he calls it The Reaper.
This sounds familiar, but I don't know if I recommended it to you. I don't think I recommended it to you, but maybe it was a recommendation you got from someone that you talked about.
Okay.
This sounds familiar, but not familiar enough that I would think that I did recommend.
Well, he sounds a lot like Kendrick, which is why I thought it would have been a rec from you. He's clearly like influenced by Kendrick.
It might be
either way. Either way, I've been putting it on, and I thought of you when I put it on, so that has to mean something.
Okay.
But yeah, solid like 35-minute EP. Like it's really nice. I enjoy a lot of the songs on there, so I've been jamming to that. Like I said, I put it on like 2 or 3 times. It's great. And the song The Reaper, I think it's like the 3rd or the 4th track in. Very solid. And then my visual medium, a little bit old, but I've thought about it a little bit, and I just genuinely enjoy their animation. The new Inside Out 2, the follow-up on the kind of inner world animated comedy. The second one introduces a lot of really funny emotions, some that obviously we all deal with, so very relatable in that regard. One of the funniest jokes in the movie was like they open up a sarcasm where like everything that they yell across it comes across like really dry and like that they're fucking with you. So you get this like really funny exchange between some of the characters. So yeah, overall just like lighthearted, really like it makes you think like, oh man, that's me, like like that kind of thing. So very wholesome family watch. Was Inside Out too, but I really enjoyed it.
Nice. I saw someone who had made an anxiety emotion pumpkin.
Okay.
Painted the face
Yeah,
on
with
it
like
with
the
the
flat
crazy
face.
hair and everything. So yeah, I haven't seen it, so I'll have to take you up on that recommendation and check it out.
It's a quality one. But yeah, that's my flavor of the week. Brings us to the end of the cooldown lap. Anything else you want to say to the folks before we get out of here?
No, just we appreciate all of you taking the time to listen with us. We love putting this out. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't. But yeah, love to do this, and we'll see you after the next race weekend at Brazil.
Yeah, so stay tuned. New episodes dropping every Wednesday after the Wednesday after every race weekend to be specific. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Peace out, everyone.
See you guys.